The plane lost all power at 30,000 feet, then a quiet old lady in row 17 took the controls. The metallic shriek was not merely loud, it was a visceral assault, a sound that bypassed the ears and vibrated through bone and marrow, tearing through the pressurized cabin like a beast awakened from a long slumber. Every rivet, every panel of the colossal aircraft seemed to vibrate in protest. Lights, which moments before had cast a comforting glow, flickered with manic intensity, dancing a strobe-like warning before dying altogether, plunging the aircraft into a terrifying, inky blackness. It was a darkness punctuated only by the faint, eerie glow of emergency strips along the floor, like phosphorescent veins guiding the doomed. The oxygen masks, those yellow harbingers of dread, dropped from overhead compartments with a soft hiss, dangling like grotesque alien fruit, swaying gently in the suddenly turbulent air. Screams erupted, primal and raw, from every corner of the vast cabin, a horrifying symphony of impending doom. Fear was a palpable entity, a cold, suffocating blanket descending upon every soul. In first class, a world away from the common anxieties of economy, Theron Vance, Alara Sterling's grandson, clutched at his designer briefcase, not for comfort, but as if it contained the very essence of his existence. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror, utterly useless, his carefully cultivated composure crumbling into frantic hyperventilation. He looked not at the emergency instructions, but at his own trembling hands, as if searching for a solution in their weakness. Beside him, Briar Thorne, his fiancée, shrieked, a high-pitched, piercing sound that grated on what remained of sanity in the cabin. Her perfectly manicured hands clawed at the air, scratching at unseen demons, oblivious to anything but her own escalating panic, her own shallow, gasping breaths. They were, in this profound moment of pure, unbridled chaos, exactly as Alara had predicted, and indeed, cultivated, self-serving, utterly devoid of grace, and incapable of looking beyond their own immediate, pathetic terror. The sight brought no satisfaction, only a quiet, weary confirmation of her deepest fears for them. The voice, when it came, was surprisingly calm, cutting through the deafening cacophony of screams and grinding metal like a surgeon's scalpel through diseased flesh. It was a voice that, moments before, had been dismissed as the reedy whisper of an old woman, barely audible over the steady, hypnotic hum of the engines. Now, it resonated with an unyielding authority, a profound command that compelled a strange, almost unnatural silence from the flight crew, who were themselves struggling against the sudden, violent lurch of the plane. They paused, their own professional training momentarily forgotten in the face of such raw, unexpected power. "The game is over," Alara Sterling declared, her voice carrying an unexpected weight, not just across the economy cabin where she stood, but seemingly echoing through the very structure of the failing aircraft itself, vibrating through the metal frame, a truth undeniable. She stood, a frail figure in worn, unassuming clothes, amidst the dropped masks, the flailing limbs of terrified passengers, the broken fragments of what was once an ordinary flight. Her eyes, usually veiled by a feigned fragility, by the carefully constructed persona of Agnes, now gleamed with a sharp, unwavering intelligence, a formidable resolve that pierced the gloom. She looked directly at the reinforced cockpit door, then, inexplicably to many, her gaze swept towards the front of the plane where Theron and Briar were locked in their selfish terror, their faces illuminated by the dim, orange emergency lights, grotesque caricatures of themselves. Her gaze was not one of judgment, but of profound, almost surgical, observation. Theron, still hyperventilating, his mind consumed by the collapse of his pampered world, had barely registered the old woman's words, attributing them to the ramblings of a senile passenger in shock, a final indignity in his final moments. Briar scoffed, a desperate, hysterical sound that was more a strangled sob than a laugh. "What is she talking about?" "Get down, you old fool," she shrieked, her words barely coherent above the whine of the wind now whistling through compromised seals, a mournful dirge accompanying the aircraft's descent. They were too engrossed in their own impending doom, too steeped in their narrow worldview, their self-pity, to comprehend the monumental shift that was about to occur, or the true identity of the woman they had so casually, so cruelly, dismissed. To them, she was an inconvenient obstacle, another piece of the general public getting in their way. The captain's strained voice crackled over the intercom, punctuated by bursts of static, a desperate plea broadcast to the void. Mayday, mayday. We've lost all power. Both engines are out. We are going down. His words were laced with a despair so profound, so utterly devoid of hope, that it turned every passenger's blood to ice. The fragile thread of hope, a delicate thing at the best of times, evaporated instantly, leaving only the chilling, undeniable certainty of their demise. A collective, guttural groan rose from the cabin. But Elara Sterling had not always been known as the reclusive visionary, the eccentric genius hidden behind a veil of quiet anonymity. Once, she had been a beacon of innovation, a relentless force who had carved Sterling Aeronautics from a daring, improbable dream into a multi-billion-dollar aviation empire, a titan of industry. Her mind, a labyrinth of complex algorithms, audacious designs, and a profound understanding of physics, had birthed aircraft that defied conventional wisdom, pushing the very boundaries of what was deemed possible in the skies. She had personally overseen the drawing of every schematic, the testing of every prototype, the grinding work of turning abstract thought into tangible reality. Each plane that bore the Sterling name was, to her, a piece of her soul, a testament to human ingenuity and the relentless pursuit of perfection. Yet, as her empire soared, reaching stratospheric heights, her personal world seemed to shrink, choked by the very wealth it generated, suffocated by the avarice of those closest to her. The disillusionment had crept in slowly, insidiously, like rust on fine machinery, imperceptible at first, then spreading to consume all integrity. It began with the subtle shifts in her family's demeanor, the way their eyes seemed to glaze over with boredom, almost disdain, when she spoke of the intricacies of a new engine design, the delicate balance of aerodynamics, or the revolutionary materials she hoped to incorporate. Their disinterest would magically vanish, their faces lighting up only at the mention of quarterly profits, stock dividends, or the next lavish acquisition. Her own son, long deceased, had been the first to show the signs, prioritizing opulent yachts, extravagant parties, and fleeting social status over the quiet satisfaction of genuine achievement, of contributing something meaningful to the world. Now, his son, Theron, embodied the very essence of this inherited malaise, a perfect, bitter distillation of all she had come to despise. Elara had watched, with a quiet despair that gnawed at her soul, as Theron grew into a man whose ambition was dwarfed only by his entitlement. He moved through life as if the world owed him its choicest fruits, as if the Sterling legacy was merely a birthright, rather than a monument to decades of relentless effort and sacrifice. His every decision seemed guided by the pursuit of more, without any understanding of the sheer effort, the profound sacrifice, or the unyielding passion that had built the Sterling legacy from nothing. He saw Sterling Aeronautics not as a monument to human ingenuity, a testament to pushing boundaries, but as a vast, inexhaustible ATM, a soulless machine designed solely to fund his extravagant lifestyle and his fiancée Briar's insatiable desire for designer labels, fleeting social status, and endless material possessions. Briar Thorne was, in Elara's estimation, a perfectly calibrated reflection of Theron's worst qualities, amplified by a sharp, calculating mind. She was beautiful, yes, in a superficial, curated way, her features sculpted by expensive treatments and her wardrobe a testament to unlimited credit. But her eyes, when she thought no one was watching, held a chilling, calculating coldness that spoke volumes of a mind utterly devoid of warmth or empathy. Elara had observed them countless times, at family dinners where they feigned interest in her anecdotes, at company events where they circulated among sycophants, their whispers conspiring, their laughter hollow and brittle. They would discuss, with casual cruelty and an alarming lack of self-awareness, how to gently guide Elara into retirement, how to modernize the company by stripping away its foundational principles of meticulous engineering, ethical conduct, and genuine innovation, replacing them with aggressive, profit-driven schemes that promised quick returns but threatened to unravel the very fabric of the company's integrity. "The old bird is losing her marbles," Theron had once chuckled during a family brunch, loud enough for Elara to hear, though he pretended she was out of earshot, oblivious to the fact that her hearing was as sharp as her mind. Always tinkering with old schematics, muttering about true innovation. "What we need is efficiency, Briar, speed. And a good PR firm to spin her retirement, make it look like a graceful exit." Briar had giggled, a tinkling, brittle sound that was like shards of glass. Exactly, darling. And imagine the space we'll have in that mansion once she moves to a comfortable little cottage. Perhaps a nice quiet one, far away from the city. The implication was clear. They wished her gone, out of sight, out of mind, so they could plunder what remained. These casual cruelties, these thinly veiled desires for her demise, or at least her convenient disappearance, chipped away at Alara's remaining trust, eroding it completely. The disguise was meticulously crafted, a testament to Alara's strategic genius and her vast resources. With her network of trusted, discreet contacts, she had arranged for her appearance to be altered subtly but effectively. Her sharp, intelligent eyes were softened by subtle makeup and carefully chosen, outdated spectacles that gave her a benign, almost scholarly air. Her posture, usually erect and commanding, was stooped, her movements deliberately slow and hesitant, mimicking the weary gait of someone burdened by age and hardship. Her elegant wardrobe, a testament to her quiet luxury, was replaced by drab, ill-fitting clothes that spoke of a life of quiet anonymity, easily overlooked, easily dismissed. She booked a last-minute economy ticket on Flight 714, a state-of-the-art Sterling Aeronautics jet, ironically, one of her own magnum opuses, designed with layers of fail-safes she knew intimately, safeguards that only she truly understood. It was the perfect stage, the ultimate test. Her plan was simple, yet audacious in its scope: to observe. To become invisible. To witness the true characters of those around her, especially Theron and Briar, whom she knew would be on the same flight, luxuriating in first class, completely unaware of the keen eyes watching them from the back of the plane. She would watch how they reacted to mundane inconveniences, to the service staff, to unexpected delays, and most importantly, how they would react when faced with genuine adversity, with the raw, terrifying reality of mortality. She had a feeling, a chilling premonition that resonated deep within her bones, that this flight would provide the ultimate crucible, the definitive answer to her lifelong question. Her legacy, the very soul of Sterling Aeronautics, depended on the truths she would uncover, truths that could only be revealed under the most extreme pressure. The sterile, almost antiseptic environment of the airport terminal hummed with the predictable rhythm of human transit, a monotonous ballet of departures and arrivals. Alara Sterling, now a quiet, unassuming figure known only as Agnes to the few who noticed her, sat patiently in a hard plastic chair at her gate, her worn carry-on bag resting at her feet like a loyal companion. Her gaze, however, was anything but passive. It swept. As boarding was announced, the two antagonists, as Alara now privately labeled them, sauntered towards the first-class line, bypassing the growing queue for economy with an air of practiced indifference, as if the common folk were not even there. Theron held up his boarding pass as if it were a royal decree, barely making eye contact with the gate agent, who looked weary from dealing with entitled passengers. Finally, he muttered, loud enough for those around him to hear, for them to know his displeasure, "I thought we'd be stuck here all day with the general public." Briar giggled, a tinkling, brittle sound that grated on Alara's nerves, a high-pitched testament to their collective condescension, their utter lack of self-awareness. Alara, observing from her economy line, a slow, patient procession of ordinary lives, allowed herself a small, knowing smile. They were playing their roles perfectly, utterly unaware they were being scrutinized by the very person whose wealth, whose influence, whose very inheritance they so greedily craved. As she shuffled slowly towards the gate, mimicking the gait of an elderly woman burdened by time and unseen sorrows, she briefly caught a glimpse of Theron and Briar through the large glass window of the jet bridge. They were already seated in first class, clinking champagne flutes, completely oblivious to the world outside their gilded cage, insulated by their wealth and their self-importance. Stepping onto the aircraft, the familiar scent of new leather, polished chrome, and aviation fuel filled Alara's nostrils, a scent she had helped create, a perfume of her life's work. She moved down the narrow aisle, her eyes scanning not just for her assigned row, but for subtle details, the wear on the seats, the meticulousness of the cabin's cleanliness, the attentiveness of the flight crew. It was a professional habit, deeply ingrained, an automatic assessment of her creation. It was then that her gaze fell upon Kaylin, the young flight attendant. Kaylin was not the picture of polished perfection often found in first class, with its veneer of effortless elegance. Her uniform, while neat, showed subtle signs of a long day's work, a testament to her dedication. A stray strand of dark hair escaped her meticulously pinned bun, and a faint smudge of what looked like coffee stained her sleeve, a small imperfection that spoke volumes of a life of service. Yet, her movements were fluid, efficient, and imbued with an earnest kindness that radiated from her. Elara observed Kaylin dealing with an elderly gentleman who was struggling to stow his oversized bag in the overhead compartment, his face flushed with exertion and embarrassment. Most flight attendants, Elara knew from years of observation, would offer a perfunctory, "Can I help you with that, sir?" a polite but often detached offer. But Kaylin knelt, offering genuine, unhurried assistance, her brow furrowed with concern, not irritation. "Here, sir, let me get that for you." "It's a bit heavy, isn't it?" she said, her voice soft and reassuring, laced with true empathy. She hoisted the bag with surprising strength, a testament to her physical resilience, then gently guided the man to his seat, ensuring his seatbelt was buckled correctly, a small, yet significant act of care. Moments later, a young mother with a fussy toddler dropped a pacifier, which rolled silently down the aisle. Kaylin, passing by with a tray of drinks, noticed immediately. She didn't hesitate. With a quick, practiced motion, she retrieved a sealed, sterile replacement pacifier from her pocket, offering it with a warm, genuine smile. "Here you go, little one. Sometimes they just disappear, don't they?" she cooed, her eyes crinkling at the corners with a warmth that touched the mother's heart. The mother's relief was palpable, a silent testament to Kaylin's intuitive understanding of others' needs. Elara, now settled into her own economy seat in row 17, a mere observer, watched Kaylin with an almost scientific fascination. Kaylin moved through the cabin not as a servant fulfilling rote duties, but as a caregiver, anticipating needs, offering comfort, her genuine empathy shining through the mundane tasks of her job. Elara noted the subtle signs of Kaylin's own fatigue, a slight slump of her shoulders when she thought no one was looking, a brief rub of her temples during a lull, yet, these never translated into impatience, irritation, or rudeness. She was a rare gem, a flicker of pure human decency in a world increasingly consumed by self. Meanwhile, a few rows ahead, the murmurs from first class filtered back, carrying the distinct tone of complaint. Theron was complaining loudly about the quality of the in-flight entertainment system, threatening to have a word with the CEO, completely unaware the CEO was observing him from economy, her gaze piercing through the thin veil of their entitlement. Breyer demanded a specific brand of champagne, then wrinkled her nose with open disdain when told it wasn't available. "Honestly, Theron, one would think a Sterling flight would have standards," she declared, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear, oblivious to the eyes that now subtly turned towards her. Their interactions were a stark, sickening contrast to Kaylin's quiet dedication. They demanded, she served, they took, she gave. This was the difference Elara sought to quantify. Elara closed her eyes, a deep sigh escaping her lips. The test was proving more illuminating than she had anticipated. She had witnessed the depths of greed and self-absorption, not just in her family, but in the corporate culture that had taken root at Sterling Aeronautics, metastasizing within its very core. But she had also seen a flicker of hope, a quiet dedication embodied by Kaylin, a young woman who found dignity and purpose in serving others, even in the most ordinary of circumstances. Little did any of them know, these seemingly insignificant observations were painting a definitive picture that would determine the future of a multi-billion-dollar empire. The true test, however, was yet to come. The calm before the storm was merely a prelude to the moment when true character would be forged in the crucible of absolute terror. The plane sliced through the vast expanse of the sky at 30,000 feet, a metal bird suspended precariously between Earth and stars, a testament to human ingenuity. A gentle hum had filled the cabin, the steady purr of powerful engines, a comforting lullaby of modernity, a promise of safe passage. Then, without warning, the lullaby died. It was not a gradual fading, but an abrupt, total cessation, like a heart suddenly stopping. A shudder, violent and unexpected, ripped through the aircraft. It wasn't a bump of turbulence, a momentary jolt. It was a profound, guttural tremor that spoke of structural distress, of metal groaning under impossible strain. The hum of the engine ceased abruptly, replaced by an eerie, suffocating silence, broken only by the increasing howl of wind through compromised seals. Then, the lights flickered, a frantic dance of artificial illumination, casting grotesque, elongated shadows, before extinguishing entirely, plunging the cabin into a profound, chilling darkness. A collective gasp rippled through the cabin, quickly followed by scattered screams, then a wave of panicked shouts, a chaotic symphony of human despair. The emergency lights, dim and orange, cast long, distorted shadows, turning familiar faces into grotesque masks of fear, making the ordinary terrifying. In first class, the veneer of composure, of carefully constructed superiority, shattered instantly, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. Theron Vance, who moments before had been idly browsing a fashion magazine, sipping chilled champagne, erupted in a guttural cry of fear, a sound more animal than human. He scrambled, not for a safety brochure, not to brace himself against the coming impact, but for his expensive smartwatch, frantically trying to connect to a non-existent signal, as if the digital world could somehow save him from the immutable laws of physics. My watch. My shares. Briar, what about my portfolio? He shrieked, his voice hoarse with terror, completely oblivious to his fiancée, Briar, who was clawing at the overhead bin, not for an oxygen mask, not for safety, but for her designer handbag, her eyes wide with a horrifying blend of fear and avarice. My emeralds. My diamond necklace. Briar wailed, her priorities laid bare for all to witness. She seemed more concerned with her material possessions, with the glittering baubles of her superficial life, than her own imminent demise, or indeed, the fate of anyone else on board. Their actions were a stark, sickening display of pure, unadulterated selfishness, confirming Alara's darkest suspicions, not just for herself, but for the entire world to see. They were everything she feared her legacy would become. Amidst the chaos, a different kind of human response began to unfold. Kaylin, the young flight attendant, her face pale but her resolve unwavering, moved with astonishing speed and grace through the disorienting darkness. She had been securing the galley when the power died, the crash of crockery echoing in the sudden silence, but the moment the screams began, she was out in the aisle, her voice surprisingly steady, a beacon of calm amidst the storm. Breathe, everyone, breathe. Put on your masks. Follow the light strips, she commanded, her voice surprisingly steady, even as the plane lurched violently, dropping several hundred feet with a sickening stomach-churning sensation that stole the breath from every passenger. She didn't show a trace of the entitlement or self-preservation that consumed Theron and Briar. Instead, she was focused entirely on her duty, on the safety of the terrified souls entrusted to her care. She helped a sobbing child put on his mask, her hands gentle but firm, then moved to an elderly woman who had frozen in shock, her eyes wide with terror, gently guiding her hands to the yellow mask. Kaylin was the embodiment of the values Alara sought, a living testament to selfless courage. The cockpit door burst open, and the co-pilot, his face ashen, stumbled out, clutching his head, his professional demeanor shattered. We're losing altitude fast. Both engines are dead. We can't get any response from the systems. It's over. His voice was thick with despair, the last vestiges of professional calm evaporated, replaced by raw, unadulterated terror. The captain, still inside, was shouting into a dead microphone, his words muffled, desperate, praying to unresponsive systems. Panic escalated. People were screaming, praying, some simply crying silently, their faces illuminated by the dim orange glow, a tableau of human misery. The air grew thin, the cabin cold, and the horrifying silence of dead engines amplified the passengers' terror. This was it. The end. The cold, certain end. But then, a figure, small and seemingly frail, rose from her seat in row 17. Alara Sterling, her disguise now a mere costume in the face of true emergency, a superfluous layer she shed with every determined step, stood tall. Her eyes, usually veiled by a feigned fragility, by the carefully chosen spectacles, now blazed with a fierce, unwavering determination, a fire that could melt steel. She moved with a purpose that defied her advanced years, pushing past the panicked passengers who barely registered her movements surprisingly swift and sure, as if guided by an unseen force. She felt the vibrations of the failing aircraft in her very bones, a deeply personal pain, a betrayal of her life's work. "What is that old woman doing?" Theron shrieked, momentarily distracted from his frantic search for his phone, his voice laced with indignation that anyone would dare disrupt his last moments of self-pity. "Someone get her to sit down. She'll trip someone." Briar nodded frantically, her eyes still darting between her handbag and the floor. But Alara ignored him. She ignored everyone. Her focus was singular, absolute. Her creation was dying, and she would not let it perish without a fight. She reached the cockpit door, now ajar, and without hesitation, pushed it fully open, revealing the desperate scene within. The co-pilot, still reeling from the captain's pronouncement, looked up, startled, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Step aside, young man," Alara commanded, her voice, though still calm, now carried an undeniable resonance, an authority that cut through the fear, the despair, the overwhelming noise of the dying plane. It was a voice that belonged to boardrooms, to design labs, to the very highest echelons of power, a voice of command that had shaped an empire. The co-pilot, bewildered, stared at her, his mind unable to process the frail old woman standing before him. "Ma'am, you can't." "I can," Alara interrupted, her eyes fixing on the complex array of dormant controls, the silent screens, the dead indicators, a landscape of professional failure. "I designed this aircraft. Every wire, every circuit, every fail-safe system. I know its heart better than anyone alive." Her words were not arrogant, but stated with the simple, undeniable truth of an engineer who intimately understood her creation. A stunned silence fell over the flight crew, and even some of the nearby passengers strained to hear, their own panic momentarily forgotten in the face of this impossible declaration. The captain, finally turning from his desperate struggle with the unresponsive controls, looked at her, his face a mixture of disbelief and a flicker of desperate, impossible hope. Who are you?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Alara Sterling, the quiet old lady from row 17, stepped into the cockpit. She straightened her worn clothes, pulling herself to her full, albeit modest, height, her posture transforming from stoop to regal, her feigned frailty dissolving into an imposing presence. She looked at the captain, then at the stunned co-pilot, and finally, through the open cockpit door, her gaze landed on Theron and Briar, who were now frozen in terrified silence, their mouths agape, their personal terror momentarily eclipsed by a far greater, more terrifying realization. "My name is Alara Sterling," she announced, her voice echoing with the full weight of her identity, of Sterling Aeronautics itself, a name synonymous with innovation and power. "And this is my aircraft." She moved to the pilot's seat, gently but firmly nudging the captain aside, her touch conveying both authority and reassurance. Her fingers, which moments before seemed gnarled and frail, danced across the controls with an astonishing speed and precision, flipping switches, pressing buttons, her mind already calculating vectors, wind shear, and the precise sequence to reactivate the auxiliary power unit she had personally designed into the aircraft, a hidden failsafe known only to a select few, a last desperate hope for survival. She worked with an almost divine focus, a symphony of engineering prowess. Theron and Briar, witnessing this impossible transformation, this surreal unveiling, felt a cold dread creep into their hearts that transcended the fear of the crashing plane. The senile old bird they had dismissed, the frail woman they had plotted to sideline, was now demonstrating a mastery over the very machine that was plummeting them towards the earth. The terror in their eyes shifted from fear of death to the chilling, stomach-turning realization that they had just witnessed the complete, utter undoing of their carefully constructed future. Their masks had not just fallen, they had been brutally ripped away, revealing their true, pathetic selves to the world, and to Alara. The landing was nothing short of a miracle, a testament to raw genius and unyielding will. Under Alara Sterling's precise, unwavering command, the colossal aircraft, once a silent metal coffin hurtling towards destruction, roared back to life with a desperate, protesting whine as the auxiliary power unit, her own secret invention, kicked in. With limited hydraulics, no main engines, and a rapidly depleting battery, Elara expertly glided the plane through the turbulent air, her hands a blur over the controls, her mind calculating every variable with astonishing speed. She guided it onto a remote, disused airstrip in a barren desert landscape, a strip that only she, with her intimate knowledge of the company's vast land holdings, would have known existed. The touchdown was rough, sending a jarring jolt through the cabin, a violent shudder that threatened to tear the plane apart, but it was a landing nonetheless, a testament to Elara's genius, her intimate knowledge of her own design, and her unshakable composure. Silence. A profound, almost sacred silence descended upon the cabin, broken only by the whimpering sobs of relief. Then, a collective gasp of disbelief, followed by an explosion of cheers, sobs of relief, and spontaneous applause that erupted like thunder. Passengers hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces, some laughing hysterically, others simply staring into the middle distance, overwhelmed by the sudden reprieve from death. Kaylin, the flight attendant, sank onto a jump seat, her body trembling with delayed shock and exhaustion, but her eyes filled with awe as she watched Elara emerge from the cockpit, not as an old woman, but as a living legend. Elara Sterling stepped out, her disguise now completely abandoned, her aura radiating command and an almost divine calm, as if she had just performed a minor inconvenience rather than saving hundreds of lives. Her eyes, sharp and clear, swept over the wreckage of fear in the cabin, lingering for a moment on Theron and Briar, who were still huddled in first class, their faces ghostly pale, their previous terror replaced by a dawning, horrifying realization of the implications of what they had just witnessed. They looked like caught thieves, stripped bare. Theron. Briar. Elara's voice cut through the nascent celebrations, carrying an icy resonance that silenced the surrounding murmurs, drawing all attention. I believe we need to have a word. Theron's jaw worked, but no sound emerged, his mind reeling, trying to process the impossible. Briar's eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape that didn't exist, a hole to crawl into, a way to disappear. The captain, now composed but utterly humbled, stood beside Elara, offering her a respectful, almost deferential nod, a silent acknowledgement of her superior skill and bravery. The remaining flight crew gathered around, their gazes fixed on the woman who had just saved their lives, a living legend who walked among them. Word spread like wildfire through the survivors, through the makeshift rescue teams that arrived hours later, and then, inexorably, to the world. The quiet old lady was Elara Sterling, the founder, the genius, the woman they had all dismissed as frail and senile. Whispers of her disguise, of her meticulous observations, of Theron and Briar's atrocious behavior, circulated rapidly, fueled by the shock and the profound sense of irony. The world watched, captivated by the unfolding drama. Days later, the fallout was swift and merciless, a meticulously planned consequence. The emergency landing made international news, not just as a miraculous feat of aviation, but as the stage for Elara Sterling's dramatic reappearance to reclaim her legacy. A global press conference was held, where Elara, no longer disguised, stood before the cameras, her presence commanding every lens, every microphone, every eye in the room. My grandson, Theron Vance, and his fiancée, Briar Thorne, have demonstrated, under extreme duress, a profound lack of character, compassion, and leadership, Elara announced, her voice steady, devoid of emotion, a pronouncement rather than an accusation. Their actions during the recent incident made it abundantly clear that they prioritize personal gain and material possessions above all else, including human life and the values that Sterling Aeronautics was built upon. Theron and Briar, watching from a cramped, rented apartment, their lavish home now a stark, mocking reminder of their lost future, saw their images splashed across every screen, juxtaposed with damning testimonials from other passengers and even some of the flight crew who recounted their selfish behavior in vivid, humiliating detail. Elara formally announced their complete disinheritance, stripping them of every penny, every stock, every vestige of the Sterling name. Every executive who had aligned themselves with Theron's vision of a purely profit-driven company, those who had turned a blind eye to the erosion of values, also found themselves summarily dismissed, their stock options rescinded, their careers in tatters. Sterling Aeronautics underwent a profound, immediate restructuring, a cleansing fire. Theron and Briar found themselves not only stripped of their expected inheritance but also ostracized by the very social circles they had so desperately courted. Their credit lines were frozen, their assets scrutinized and seized, and their carefully constructed world of luxury crumbled into dust, leaving them with nothing. They were left with nothing but the crushing weight of their own greed and the public's scathing condemnation. The sheer magnitude of their fall was absolute, leaving them isolated and destitute, a stark, public example of character's ultimate price. Conversely, Kaylin, the unassuming flight attendant, found her life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. Elara, recognizing a kindred spirit, summoned her to the Sterling Aeronautics headquarters, a place Kaylin had only ever seen from the tarmac, a distant, unreachable symbol of power. Kaylin, nervous but still embodying her quiet dignity, her inherent goodness, was ushered into Elara's sprawling, minimalist office, a space that spoke of quiet power and profound intellect. Kaylin, Elara began, her gaze warm and direct, devoid of the cold scrutiny she applied to others. Your actions during the crisis were exemplary. You demonstrated courage, selflessness, and a profound dedication to the well-being of others. These are the qualities that built Sterling Aeronautics, and these are the qualities I wish to see lead it into the future. Kaylin, utterly bewildered, her eyes wide with disbelief, could only stammer, "Ma'am, I was just doing my job." Elara smiled, a genuine, warm smile that softened her features. "No, Kaylin. You were being a human being, a compassionate leader. Qualities that are far rarer than any technical skill, and far more valuable." Elara didn't just offer Kaylin a promotion. She offered her a new life. Kaylin was offered a substantial financial reward, enough to ensure her family's security for generations, to erase every worry they had ever known, and a full scholarship to pursue any degree she desired, with the explicit understanding that Elara saw her as a future leader within Sterling Aeronautics, not necessarily in engineering, but in human resources, in corporate culture, in fostering the very empathy and integrity that had saved so many lives. Kaylin, overwhelmed, wept tears of disbelief and gratitude, her quiet kindness finally recognized. She had never asked for anything, had simply done what she believed was right, and now, the universe, through Elara, had responded with a generosity she could scarcely comprehend. Her quiet kindness had resonated with the most powerful person in the room, and her simple goodness had been recognized, and rewarded, beyond her wildest dreams. Months later, Sterling Aeronautics began its new chapter, not just financially robust, but spiritually renewed, a phoenix rising from the ashes of greed. Under Elara's watchful eye, and with Kaylin's growing presence within the leadership team, the company shifted its focus. Ethics, employee well-being, and genuine innovation, not just profit margins, became its guiding principles, its very DNA. Kaylin, having pursued a degree in organizational leadership and corporate ethics, thrived in her new role, her quiet strength and unwavering compassion inspiring a new generation of Sterling employees. She wasn't merely a figurehead, she was a living embodiment of the values Elara sought to reinculcate, a tangible symbol of the company's new direction. Her background as a flight attendant gave her a unique, grounded perspective that resonated deeply with the workforce, fostering a culture of mutual respect, genuine care, and a renewed sense of purpose. Elara Sterling, having secured her legacy in the most profound way possible, having purified her life's work, finally found a measure of peace. She still visited the company, still tinkered with new designs, her mind perpetually active, but the gnawing disillusionment had receded, replaced by a quiet satisfaction. She had found a worthy successor to her values, if not necessarily her exact role. She often observed Kaylin, now a confident, articulate presence in boardrooms, guiding discussions with an integrity that Elara had long feared was extinct in the corporate world. The irony was sweet, the future of her empire was now steered not by a blood relative consumed by greed, but by a young woman whose only inheritance was her innate goodness, her unwavering decency, and her quiet strength. As for Theron and Briar, their names became synonymous with public disgrace, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. Stripped of their wealth, their social standing evaporated like mist, leaving them to grapple with the harsh realities of a life without unearned privilege. They squabbled constantly, their relationship, once fueled by mutual ambition and a shared lust for luxury, curdling into bitter resentment, each blaming the other for their catastrophic downfall. Their fall was a cautionary tale, whispered in hushed tones in the very circles they once dominated, a grim reminder that while money can buy many things, it cannot purchase character, integrity, or true worth. They served as a potent reminder that in the end, the truth always comes to light, and character is the only currency that truly matters. The story of Alara Sterling and Flight 714 became a modern legend, retold in business schools as a case study in corporate ethics, and whispered as a parable in the aviation industry. It served as a stark, undeniable truth. True character is not revealed in moments of comfort or prosperity, but in the crucible of crisis. When the lights go out, when the engines fall silent, and when all seems lost, it is then, in the deepest darkness, that the true essence of a person shines through. And for those who choose kindness, who prioritize compassion over self-interest, and who dare to act with integrity even when fear grips their hearts, there will always be a reward, often far greater and more enduring than any material possession. For in the end, it is not what one owns, but who one truly is, that defines a legacy. What an incredible story of hidden strength and unexpected heroes. This tale reminds us that true character is often revealed when faced with the greatest challenges. If you were gripped by Alara's ingenious plan and Kalen's quiet courage, you're in the right place. We share stories like this every week, showcasing the dramatic twists of fate and the profound lessons hidden in everyday life. Make sure you don't miss our next video. Subscribe to our channel right now and turn on notifications so you're always the first to know when a new story drops. And we want to hear from you. What was the most shocking part of Alara's reveal? What do you think Theron and Briar truly learned from their downfall? Have you ever witnessed someone's true character emerge under pressure? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. We love reading your insights and experiences.